So, good afternoon, good day, wherever you are in the world. As I say in the beginning, every guest that we have is very, very special. And today we have someone who has a really, really great story, especially for equality in women's sports, and has been called a pioneer, and no doubt she is. She was 2008 Rookie of the Year snowboarding. In 2011, she took the sport to new levels for female riders and completed the first double backflip, and also has been advocating for women and holds an event annually up at Mammoth Mountain called the Amusement Park. And so today we have the fantastic and wonderful Miss Kimmy Fasani.
Hi, thank you for having me.
No, thank you. Welcome, welcome. So let's hear the backstory. Let's hear some history. Where'd you grow up? Who introduced you to snowboarding? How did you get involved?
I grew up in a small town in the Sierra called Truckee. It's about 15 miles away from Lake Tahoe. And I was raised by an amazing, independent, fearless mom. And she was a nurse, but she always really encouraged me to go out there and be whoever I wanted to be, and really enabled me to just chase my passions. And she got me on skis when I was 2 years old. And then by 9 years old, she surprised me with my first snowboard. And so that was really exciting. Obviously, it was like a board from a ski swap, and it was a Burton, and it was just like the epitome of a dream come true. A lot of my guy friends had already been snowboarding, and so I found it really exciting to try something new. And it was such a new sport at that point that I liked the idea of doing something different. And my mom was a terrific skier, and she didn't really want me to snowboard because here she had just invested 9 years, or I guess 7 years with me to get me skiing proficiently, and now I want to switch it up. So she let me snowboard and ski at the same time until I could like keep up with her on my snowboard. And then she let me choose which one I would prefer to do when I was 12 years old. And I was ready for new equipment, and I just decided to take the path of snowboarding. I was also a gymnast at the time and had a pretty severe arm injury and had to have surgery. So that kind of took me out of that. And so snowboarding, I really dove deep into a new passion. And I had an incredible group of guys that really encouraged me to just push my limits. And then that all kind of led me to contest circuit, like the USASA, which is the amateur contest circuit for snowboarding. And through that series, I ended up taking home first place at nationals 3 years in a row in slopestyle. So I think just really progressively, like my career just started unfolding without, I don't want to say effort. It was definitely effort, but I think because it was passion driven and really fun, it just felt like a great opportunity to chase something that was new. And then that led me to pro circuits and obviously injuries and all the things that come with being a professional athlete. But anytime I got hurt, the question always led me back to, well, when can I get back on my board? And so, snowboarding just quickly became something that I couldn't live without.
That's so cool. It's kind of ironic and almost serendipitous in a way that your first board at 9 years old is Burton, and now you're a rider for Burton.
Yeah, and that was, I don't know if it was like something where I was just like set onto it. Burton has always been a brand that I've always really, really respected. I loved the riders from Victoria Jalouse to Shannon Dunn to all the whole team just has such a great variety. They've always really supported women and the balance of men and women. And growing up in Tahoe, there weren't that many girls that snowboarded, so I was always with guys. And I never really understood or believed in segregation between us. And being part of a brand that really encourages and supports the unity of all of us kind of being out in the mountains together has been since day one. And yeah, that relationship just kind of was almost stamped when I was 9 years old. And then I got on with like their rep level management locally and then signed with them. And I actually signed with Burton. They were my first like big board sponsor. And then we kind of had we separated for about 5 years. And then I came back to them in my later career and became like their AK backcountry big mountain rider. So
Yeah. So
all in all,
explain to everyone what AK is, because it's a brand within Burton, and just explain what that is.
yeah. So just as any company does, there's different kind of sub brands within them. And this AK is really supposed to represent the most technical, breathable, mountain strenuous fabric, Gore-Tex. It's gonna make your day out in the mountains way better because you don't have to think about what your gear is doing, you know? It's like waterproof and it's durable. And so it's the highest end that Burton makes, essentially. And it's designed for people that are going to be on the mountain all day, every condition. And so I was just getting into like filming and spending a lot more time in the backcountry when this whole opportunity arose for me to be part of this part of the brand.
Great timing.
And yeah, I was super lucky. Victoria Jalouse and Natasha Zurich had just retired, and they were looking for, I want to say, like a new up and comer to kind of not fill their place because they will be legends forever, but like help move the brand forward in a unique way. And so I was really fortunate to get that opportunity. And yeah, I was so green. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, obviously. But I think that was the beauty in it. You know, like we're not all the same and we all have different viewpoints and perspectives. And especially we all see the mountains so differently. So I feel like I was given a really unique opportunity to kind of step into the AK brand, the Burton brand, with a total sense of creativity and freedom.
Cool. Cool. So you mentioned something really sweet and endearing about your mom there. And when did you realize that I mean, because usually what happens is when you become a parent or you get a little bit older, hindsight's 2020, and you can see it's like, oh wow, they did that. When did you realize that your mom was really just progressive in a sense and just like pushing you and giving you all that confidence? When did you realize that?
I want to say from like a very early age, my mom had always encouraged me to be happy and to be myself.
Mm-hmm.
And there were so many different layers to that, but maybe because she was a very unique soul herself, like she always kind of chased a path that was different, and she was not afraid to speak up and use her voice to kind of make change or have opinions. I think maybe seeing the way she lived and then also the way she supported me. And it wasn't like, here's a bunch of money, go out and do whatever you want. It was like, I'll support you if you put in the extra effort. Like, if you want to go to the mountain, show me that you're up early and you want to show up and have a powder day. And I always made that like a big initiative. It was always actions that she really helped me uh, lead by example, I guess. She would always really see if I was truly invested in what I wanted by seeing how my actions stood for what I was saying. And thankfully, that was something that she did even in school. Like I didn't have to have straight A's. It was more so her really helping me understand what I was learning. And there was never pressure on like, oh, you have to up your grades. It was like, how can we really make this fun and entertaining? And how can you tell stories that are your about what you want? And like, I don't know. She was just very encouraging.
That's so great. Yeah, it's really interesting because I think across all sports in this day and age that people are really kind of diving down and trying to find the young next phenom. and there's a significant amount of pressure put on these 10, 11, 12-year olds. And I'm sure you've noticed that change from when you grew up. But, you've got a young 2-year-old who's definitely showing quite some fearless antics with you. But what would be your best piece of advice to moms and dads out there that have these kids that want to grow up and ski and snowboard and chase dreams? What would your advice be at this point?
I think the biggest takeaway I've had is I see when parents force things on their children, there's going to be a day where the kid decides regardless. And so it's more so introducing, if you want to introduce everything to them, that's wonderful. And then let them choose and let them really tell you how they want to spend their time or where they want to go or how they want to be outside. And sure, there's boundaries to that. Like sitting in front of a TV all day might be their first choice, but that's not what our household does. So really encouraging choice and enabling them to pick between the activities they want to do. And for me, I think even though I said my mom was super encouraging, like I think she would have been very content if I was a skier, but yet she let me choose snowboarding. And it was because that was still a way for us to experience the mountains together. And I loved that. I loved being able to do something a little different than her. And yet we still got to share a very similar experience and grow these memories together. And as a parent myself, I'm watching my son, and of course, like my husband, who's a professional skier, and I would love for our son to want to surf so we can go on these great surf vacations, and we would love him to love the mountains. But all we can really do is introduce those things to him, and then ultimately it's his choice of what he is going to like to do and chase for a passion. Like if he wants to go be an astronaut, like more power to him. At least I've done the due diligence of trying to introduce the outdoors and trying to get him to really respect the environment and the places that we play.
Right. Well said. Very well said. Thank you. You talk about growing up, and I think snowboarding really early on, and as of late, I think there's been a huge push with women's uh, sports, action sports, and the levels are getting higher and higher and higher, and it's so fun to watch. And you talked about, Victoria and Shannon as far as like looking up to them, and you your peers were probably mostly boys. Did you ever get any pushback for being a female at all from anyone?
I've definitely had my fair share of advocating for women to be included in shoots and film trips and just really asking like these pivotal questions of like, okay, well, it's an all guys shoot, but why? Or, hey, I really want to film in the backcountry. Why are there no girls on this film trip? Or,
And would you vocalize that to people? Would you verbalize it?
yeah, and I wouldn't do it necessarily in my early career,
Right.
but in my early career, I also didn't feel like the segregation was as great because when you're still like up and coming, that attention isn't necessarily, the pressure isn't on you. And same with the guys, like I feel like the better you get, the stakes are higher. And so the more proficient you have to be and the more confident and trustworthy you have to be as a partner, especially in the backcountry. Yeah. And it's a lot harder for women to get experience in the backcountry because there's so few of us out there chasing that passion that in order to actually get on a film crew or get into a endemic big film movie, you have to have experience and that you have to be a trustworthy partner. But there's no trade-off of how to get that experience. And that is what really drove me in the direction of like creating amusement park and then the Evolution Amusement Mountain, which is this all women's experience to help mentor a big group of women, like 15 to 20 women, and give them opportunity to shine, whether it was in a terrain park setting where they got to hit a jump and not in a contest setting. They just got to progress their own riding with no pressure, but they would get media and editorial opportunity. And then that evolved into my backcountry event where I was like, goodness, like it's taken me 8 years or now 10 years to get the experience that I've got to evolve into a very confident, trustworthy backcountry rider. And as a female back there, where now like the crews that I go out with, guy or girl, know, okay, she can hold her own, she's going to be fine. And so this backcountry event for these ladies was like, how can I pass down as much knowledge in a short time frame to these ladies to help expedite their learning curve so that they don't have to invest as much time as I did, to become that partner in the backcountry? Because overall, I just want more women to be able to experience the mountains together. And I want those women to feel like they can be part of any crew, guy or girl, and have the confidence to go out there and say, hey, I can do this. And over the years too, it's definitely taken a lot more courage to speak up. And I feel like the courage came from proving myself over and over and over again. And then to finally have like the traction where, like when I got in with the Burton crew, where it was like Mikey Renz and Nickel Bang, and they took me out and they let me film with them. And even prior to that, it was Devin Walsh and Ika Backstrom. It's like these guys really invested in me and like let me learn with them and never really criticized me. They let me hit the jumps with them, and they just like really enabled me to become a stronger rider. And that is where my courage came, and that's what gave me the opportunity to film with Absinthe, was those guys vouching for me. So the more opportunity we can really provide to these younger generations to use your voice, but also make sure your actions can speak up just as loud as your voice.
Yeah, and I love that story, is that it sounds like it had nothing to do with gender. It's like kind of like what your mom instilled in you. It's like, put in the work. If you want it, you got to go get it, and you put in the work so much, in fact, that some of the names that you just named are some pretty heavy hitters. And
Yeah,
and you were encouraged and welcomed, and off you went. Wow, that's radical stuff right there.
thank you.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, understatement. So on those films, so viewers um, can go take a peek at what you do. Out of all the films and parts that you've done, what are you most proud of? What is the film or the section, the part that you had that you're most proud of at this point?
That's a great question. I would say there's a couple layers to that, but the part that I'm most proud of was the first year that I filmed for Absinthe Films.
Mm-hmm.
And the name of that movie was After Forever. And it's, the whole movie is really, really amazing. But that year was the first year I got to go to Alaska. And well, second year I went to Alaska, but the first time I went with Haynes with a really heavy hitting crew. The director, producer of Absinthe, Justin Hosnick, paired me up with Nicholas Mueller and Manuel Diaz.
Wow.
And I was still very green in big mountain riding, like riding lines. I was very green. And so in some ways, and he knows this, but in some ways I felt like he was totally sandbagging me, like taking my sponsor's money. I was filling a seat and I would never get out of the helicopter. And just to be partnered on a crew like that, who these two guys, for the people that are unaware, are like some of the most well-respected big mountain riders in snowboarding, and AK is their home. Like they, not literally, but like they can ride all terrain in Alaska, and it's very inspiring and yet very progressive. And so I knew being put on a crew with them was gonna not only push my it was not only going to push my riding, but it was really going to set the standard for like, okay, it's time now. You get to actually see if your actions live up to your confidence here.
Right.
And thankfully, I ended up walking away from that season. I learned so much. I bailed down so many mountains, like so many tomahawks. I can't even tell you.
Oh,
but I ended up winning Women's Rider of the Year from that video part, and I ended up winning Video Part of the Year as well from the two most,
right?
like the two endemic magazines.
Yeah.
And so that year just like put me over the top, where I was like, holy cow, I can harness that energy and I can transform it into a positive beast that can power through these challenges mentally, physically, and really I was able to showcase what I was able to do in big mountain riding.
That's so great. And for everyone out there that does not know, in the world of snowboarding and skiing, okay, we've got black diamonds, double black diamonds, and then we have Alaska, which is above the screen. It's like next level stuff. Um,
We always joke like Alaska is like, cool, you graduated and you already have your master's. And then like going to Alaska is like, okay, how are you gonna apply everything you've ever learned in your whole life and take it beyond that? And it's just like this epitome of, you think you're a good snowboarder, then go to Alaska and see if you can try all the games that play out in your head.
yeah, well said, well said. So to get to these mountains, I mean, you talked about the copter. You go up in a helicopter, you're like teetering above the like basically on top of a mountain that is not very wide at all. And you got to have the guts to pop out and basically I mean, some sections look like oververt, and the GoPro footage is really amazing because you get a sense of what that's like. How, I mean, in your professional career, was doing that trip the most scared you've ever been, as far as like, oh my gosh, here I am in Alaska, I got to do this?
Yes. Simply. I mean, learning new tricks is scary. But standing on these peaks in Alaska, I think there was still that sense of like, there is no safety net. And similar with hitting a 70-foot jump and trying the first double backflip, like it's all relative in some space. Mm-hmm. But with hitting the jumps in the train park, at least I had practice on jumps at the similar size. So I knew kind of how to scale. I knew my jump, like my air awareness. And I was pretty confident that I could feel and visualize like how that trick was going to go. Where in Alaska, because we were getting like dropped off at the top of these mountains, I wasn't getting to know the mountain from the bottom up, the mountain from the bottom up. Right. I was really looking down these mountains going, oh my gosh. And I just had to constantly remind myself, you know how to snowboard, you know how to snowboard, you'll get down. And it just took a lot of confidence to be like, cool, like I love the way this mountain looks, but I don't really know how it's going to feel. Let's embrace it and let's just go for it and see what I can do. And it also came down to having the best mentors. Those guys, once again, like Nicholas and Manuel and Austin Sweeten, they all really helped me start seeing those mountains as a creative canvas of my own. Mm-hmm. And they helped bring this life into me that I could like start visualizing how I, as like an independent individual, could visualize myself riding down them. And visualization is so much of like so important in how we balance ourselves mentally as athletes, as you know. And so it's like, once I could start to feel and like harness what it looked like and really visualize what it was going to feel like coming down, that fear started dissipating. And it was more so just trying to transform like my anxiety or my energy into positive power of purpose. And yeah, so it was a new way to harness my fear.
It's really great to hear that. I remember talking to Dave Downing, Shannon Dunn's husband, a few years ago, and he remembered telling me the story about when he went to Alaska, where they would sit and they would draw out the lines, and it's like, okay, I gotta go here, I go here, I gotta go here, I go here, and it's literally that guided imagery, that visualization piece. And he remember, it's like I was so focused on that stuff that I wasn't worried about what I was really getting into, because I had to focus and concentrate.
Yeah, it's like every turn matters. And then it's like this spiritual connection with the mountain where like the mountain's sloughing, so there's like loose snow falling with you every turn, and it's almost like the mountain is breathing with you every time you turn, and you just have to be super tuned. And the second you like let down your guard, that's when you like get sloughed out or something happens. So it's just like you are so in flow state when you're in those mountains that it's the ultimate journey as a snowboarder, at least for myself.
Well, as an athlete, period, that flow state is what everyone talks about.
Yeah.
I mean, they just did the a big thing on HBO with LeBron James and Shaun White and Michael Phelps, and they were talking about, oh, what do you feel in those moments, in the big moments? They're like, I don't feel anything. I feel great. I'm just doing my thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh, what? So, have you ever been in an avalanche? Do you ever have any complications up there in Alaska? Or you?
Yes, I've been in one. Thankfully, I never got taken down big time. And I'll be the first I'll be the first to admit that it was like definitely a naive mistake. Sometimes there's a superior confidence as athletes to get into terrain that there's instabilities, and we knew that there was this instability, and the guys that I was with are way more confident, or I don't even like to use these words in relation to examining like slope stability, but I was not as confident on this terrain as they were, and yet they chose to ride a couple lines, and then my ego got in the way, and I was like, well, shoot, like if they keep getting dropped off at the top, like that means I'm paying for that heli time, and I want to get a run in, and I'm the girl, and I don't want to look like I'm not as strong as them. Like I want to make sure like I'm riding the train too. And there was a lot of this back and forth within myself, and I finally decided to ride a line that I'd ridden before, and so I was already familiar with the slope, and I knew where like my pull-out points would be if there was an avalanche. And sure enough, like 4 or 5 turns in, I set off like the whole slope, and it was like the biggest line on the face. And thankfully, the place where I needed to stop was my safe haven, and I had already planned that, so I knew. But it was a really eye-opening experience because I knew that I shouldn't, but I really wanted to test that boundary. And in the end, it was like a how to be in an avalanche experience without having to deal with the bad ramifications. Right. And it's made me a lot more aware now. And I've become a lot more confident in saying no and backing down off terrain, because I think so much of it is really now realizing that not only did I put myself in jeopardy, I put my crew in jeopardy. And even though the guys were confident in that terrain, they were putting us at jeopardy too by riding that terrain. So it's a double-edged sword. And I understand why we do it sometimes, but at the same time, I've just tried to choose a more responsible route. Obviously, especially now being a mom, I'm like, if I had my son watching this, what would I tell him? So trying to become a better influence and more responsible in my decision making.
Is that hard from you, from just like a mental mindset, like the psychology of, you become a parent and then all of a sudden you put on these lenses and you see the world completely differently and your purpose is way different. Do you find yourself taking more calculated risks, or do you find yourself taking less risks? Like how do you have that balance in doing your job and making sure you're still available for your family?
I've always been really inspired by this question. And I think for me, thankfully, I've always been a very calculated rider and athlete, and I never go out there and plan to like risk my life. And I never really plan to do like the gnarliest thing ever, even though like, sure, there's these like landmark achievements that I've accomplished, but it's like,
have no doubt.
right. But it's not me saying like, cool, I'm willing to risk it all. But at the same time, going back into the mountains, there's a different type of balance. For the first 15 months of my son's life, I was breastfeeding, so I knew like I was his life source. And it made it a really hard like tug of war, because that investment of time in the mountains was really strenuous for me and like stressful, having a baby at home. And so that definitely was a different shift in my mind. But as soon as I'm back in the mountains, I feel like I can tap in pretty quickly as long as I know he's in good hands. And I would say that my risk level is still somewhat the same, and yet my level for progression seeking thrill is what has changed the most. I don't need to be the one that's out there learning all the new tricks. I'd rather find these connections with these mountains that are remarkable, and like have a very spiritual connection to me, and like I want to go ride that mountain, and I would like to navigate the terrain this way, and I would like to ride more fluidly in Alaska. And so my goals have kind of changed on what I see as progressive, and I think that is more, it creates more longevity for my career.
Right.
And yeah.
Well, I think that is really exemplified by the fact that you do these workshops trying to pass on knowledge and trying to empower women, especially in the backcountry, which is an incredibly intimidating place no matter what. Because like you said, you're out there all alone. Now, and just shifting gears here a little bit, on that note, there was a really amazing, great story that you were involved with your career, which is basically just busted down so many doors for so many female athletes out there. And it started with this runner from Nike, and then you yourself became pregnant, and Donna Carpenter, who's one of the great female voices in action sports, helped. I'll let you tell the story. So take us through that. This is, CNN. This was all over. I mean, you got a lot of play for this. I don't even think you were trying to, but when we look back on things, I think this is probably one of the most pivotal things for women in action sports in particular.
That's so nice of you to say. And yeah, I have to admit, it was a crazy journey to go through all of these conversations. So to take us back, in 2000, so I win Women's Rider of the Year. That's early 2017 in January. The same time my mom's sick. She's like in her deathbed of dying from cancer. So it's like this high and low of my career and my personal life. And my mom dies at the end of January. And by early February, March, Chris and I are like, oh my gosh, like we've never had a desire more great now to start a family. Like he lost his dad to cancer. I've lost both parents to cancer. We only have his mom left as a grandparent. And we just really started like digging within ourselves of like, oh my gosh, like we've put our career first, and now nobody gets to witness like us starting a family. And so we decided to start a family. And in June, I found out I was pregnant of 2017. And that fall, all of my contracts were up. And yeah, I'm coming off like the biggest season of my later career.
Yeah. And
so through that whole season, prior to becoming pregnant, I also filmed another video part. So I filmed 2 video parts back to back, 2016, 2017. And then I'm pregnant in 2017. And I kind of just decided, okay, I have to figure out what is the priority for myself. Like, what do I want? Am I ready to stop snowboarding? No.
No way.
Still going to be in the mountains? Yes. Have there been any other women that really have done this in snowboarding? Not really. Everybody's either chosen to retire or got pregnant and then retired and never really continued their career while they were pregnant and starting a young family. And I can't take the credit saying, oh, I'm like the first one to do it. It was more so like there was nobody that I was looking to go, how can I do this? Like, is there verbiage in contracts that protect me? Pregnancy has always somewhat been considered an injury and in all of our contracts. So I decided to approach my sponsors that year, especially Burton, and I was super transparent. Even before I was out of my first trimester, I told them that I was pregnant and that I would like to continue my career. And when my contracts were being negotiated, I can't say they exactly went 100% smoothly. There was definitely some gray area there. Yeah. But thankfully, Donna Carpenter at Burton caught wind of what was happening, and she harnessed this power of her and the amazing brand that Burton is, and said, we will support you. And I called her personally and I told her what was going on. And she said, let's do this. Let's do this together. Like, neither of us knew what to expect of how to represent an athlete with a brand, but she was super cordial and accepting kind of ideas of how we could transform this contract. So I knew it could hopefully meet the needs that I needed as a female athlete. Like, being able to have somebody help me and be on the road with me while I was still breastfeeding, and helping pay for like the travel there for that person, and then also giving me a little bit of time off after I had my baby so I could like get back into shape. So I didn't feel like I had to have this pressure of getting back on snow really fast. And so that happened in late 2017. I re-signed my contract in early November of 2017. And then I have my baby early March. And it kind of all gets, I mean, we talk about it. That was on CNN. I think it was like CNN Money, and Burton really did a great job at supporting me through my pregnancy. And I've never realized how many critics there were of us as women until you're pregnant, and then everybody has an opinion of what level of activity you're doing. So I really tried to like be a vocal ambassador for women in general, that it's our body and we are allowed to be able to make these decisions based on like the safety within our own psyche of what we can do. And I snowboarded and rock climbed until I was about 38 weeks pregnant and felt great. And it was like the best thing I could have done for myself. And then it was about a year later, and we went on a sailboat trip for a Burton photo shoot. And we were in the Arctic Ocean, about 400 miles from the North Pole. Wow. And thankfully, like Burton encouraged me to bring my son and my son, Koa, and my husband on the boat. So we have a 13-month-old boy. We have a 13-month-old boy on the boat, and we're on the sailboat for 6 days out of service. And I get back into service to a whole bunch of text messages and kind of like this wave of news that an amazing woman, Alicia Montano, who was a Nike runner, challenged that brand for a campaign they did that was called Dream Crazy. And she encouraged dream maternity because she was not necessarily supported through her pregnancy. And she ended up changing the chapter and moving on to a different sponsor. But she really shook up a big conversation, and it was on New York Times Opinions. Mm-hmm. And because of her vocal power with her campaign, Burton immediately changed all female contracts at the brand to be reflective of the same verbiage that I had in my contract. So like it was this thing that we never thought would be such a big deal, and it did definitely gain a lot of traction, but it was a huge needle mover for the rest of action sports. I know a lot of other big brands changed their verbiage to support women in pregnancy, and it just kind of, I mean, I can't believe that we're still having to have these conversations, but it was like a huge opportunity for action sports and women within the sport to feel a little bit more safe to continue their career and balance motherhood. And I'm working really closely with Alicia now, and she's started a nonprofit that's called andmother.org. And it's to help the women that aren't being supported through these companies so that they can get grants to actually maintain their careers professionally and have either somebody to travel with them on the road or pay for lodging or pay for trips, so that these women, these moms, can really get out there and still be passionate and show their kids what it's like to work hard and play hard.
That's amazing. I mean, Elise it was one of the questions I was going to ask you, but I'm like, I was wondering if you ever met her, and obviously you have, and she's the catalyst to really get this going. And thank goodness Donna Carpenter over at Burton was really supportive of the movement. It's so empowering, and I couldn't agree with you more. It's like, how did this take so long? It seems kind of silly, but regardless, I think when people look to you and look back on your career, this is going to be one of the things that you're going to be most remembered by, and I'm sure you're very proud of it as well.
Yeah, and I guess it's like, because I'm really passionate about snowboarding and women and equality, and it's like I'm not doing things in vain. I'm really like, I want to move the needle so that other women have an easier time getting to where they can be successful and confident in their space without having to do all these battles. And so hopefully these conversations and these um, things that we make happen really help shape that conversation to make it way easier and streamlined. And I'm very grateful that I've been able to make the change. And it's almost like motherhood has given me a different type of progression. It's more of a vocal progression on how I can use my voice to help others really become all that they can be as well.
Yeah, that's great. Good to hear. That's so good to hear. It's good stuff. Now, returning to some of the athletic side of things, you've had some pretty heavy injuries. What stands out as like the worst one for you?
The worst injury I've had was in late 2012. Basically, in July of 2012, the Olympic Committee announced that slopestyle was going to be part of the Olympics. And I had already transitioned into backcountry riding. I just signed with Burton as a backcountry rider, but my heart was really set on the opportunity of potentially going to the Olympics. And that was like a childhood dream. And because slopestyle was my event, and I can't say I ever did well in contests, so that should have been the first sign. In my pro career, I always like choked going into finals. But I don't know, I felt like I was coming off a really strong year and learned a lot and wanted to focus on like learning new tricks and taking it into a new level. And so I was full of vigor starting off that season, and I ended up drifting off a park jump into the trees, and I broke my pelvis and I did my ACL, MCL, PCL in my knee all at the same time. And that, I mean, that was like probably the lowest mentally I had ever been in my career, because here I was once again just coming off a very high season. I had just learned the double backflip and had that year with Devin and Ika in the backcountry, and I was riding for DC at the time as their only female, and then I switched sponsors. So it was like I started doubting the decision making I was making, because I was like, oh my gosh, like, am I fighting the resistance now? Like, am I doing something that I shouldn't be doing? And sure enough, like, the doctor came out of the surgery, and when I went into surgery, he didn't know that I had done my ACL. He thought it was just my PCL, MCL, and my pelvis. And when he came out of surgery, and he was pretty certain that I'd be able to get back on my board in time for the Olympics prior to surgery. And I came out of surgery, which was supposed to be a 3-hour surgery and was 6 hours. And he said, I'm so sorry. Like, you also tore your ACL. You're going to be off snow for at least a year. And on top of that, I don't think your knee is ever going to operate the same as it did prior. You might want to start family planning. And it was just like this, like, deer in headlights, like
family planning.
Yeah, like, yeah. And mind you, my doctor he's incredible. Like, he is an athlete. He knows what it takes. He knew my drive, but he was being a realist with me, because the extent of my injury was not something that was going to be easy to come back from. But then, like we were talking about, like, when you dig deep and you dig into your purpose and you try to figure out what it is you truly wanted, there was nothing more that I wanted than to get back on my board and prove to myself and to my sponsors and to the doctor that I was not done. And so, with hard work, I mean, I was bedridden for 3 months, and then I wasn't allowed to do any type of resistance training or like hill climbing on my bike for 7 months. But then at that 11-month mark, or it was actually at 10 months, I had asked the doctor a couple of days after surgery, I'm like, okay, so I can't snowboard for a year, but could I do a triathlon? And he just like looked at me and laughed. He was like, of course, you like, I'm telling you, you can't snowboard and you want to go run, bike, and swim. But I put all of my focus on training for this sprint length, so short distance triathlon in October of 2013. And that to me was like the test of my mind and body. Like, cool, if I can do a triathlon, which I've never done before, I think I'll be ready for snow. And I was completely humbled by the experience, but I ended up winning my age group in the triathlon and got back on snow that winter and just never really looked back. And sure, it took me time to regain my strength, but my confidence was there, like my mind was there, which is what I was most grateful for. And that's what injuries have always taught me, is like this way to overcome and kind of move past fear and really be present. And that one was kind of the epitome of all of that.
So you're bedridden 3 months. You're basically alone with your thoughts. Who did you turn to anyone to talk to someone professionally, personally? Like how do you navigate that? Just being active and being, like peak career stuff like that, Olympics coming up, and then all of it's taken away. Like how do you navigate that? Because I'd imagine, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, imagine that for you professionally, that was probably a pretty big low point there for a few moments.
Yeah, it was horrible. I was really depressed and trying to figure out like if it was all worth it. Like I was so helpless. I'm a very independent person and I was just helpless. Like I needed people to bring me things every 10, 15 minutes. I needed help getting to the bathroom. I needed help showering or whatever. So it was a very humbling experience. Thankfully, Chris was by my side the whole time. Poor thing. He's been through a lot. He's had to be there with
Both
me.
been here together.
I know. We've been through a lot. We've been together for a long time, since we were like 16 and 19. So we've seen a lot of each other. But so yeah, Chris was there. My mom was there. She was really supportive. And I read a lot of self-help books, which like the book Be Like Water. I don't know. It's a martial arts book, and it's just about like the water, the flow of water, and like resistance and whatnot. So I read a lot. Be able to just sit there. I just chose to like focus on what I could do and instead of what I couldn't do. And that's what really helped bring me through that injury, was like, cool, I can't ride a bike up a hill, but I can ride 20 miles on flats. So let's ride 20 miles on flats. Or I can't swim in a pool by kicking my legs, but I can swim using my arms. So I like got a buoy between my legs and just focused on the things that I really could do. And staying active has always been like my biggest form of mental release. I'm a cardio junkie. I really like moving my body. That's like my stress reliever. So once I was able to like be more mobile, that is what got me out of my funk. And I was able to just really pick up where I left off and focused on different things. And that's, I think, why the triathlon was so healing for me, because it was a whole new thing. And I don't like to say that I'm a competitive person, but I do remember like running past other women, looking at their numbers, like their age numbers on their leg, because I was competing. Like I wanted to win, like I was like out there and I wanted it. And so I don't know, it was really healing for me, I think, to be able to put my energy and focus into trying to be better at being an all-around athlete.
Yeah, and it's really sweet and endearing to hear you and kind of the mind shift. It's like, well, I can't do this, but I can do this. And it goes back to the beginning of the conversation of like choosing to be happy and despite all the adversity and everything, and it's appreciating what you have versus what you don't have. So that your mom did a great job. She did a wonderful job.
I'm very grateful for the lessons that she taught me.
Yeah.
Because choice isn't always easy. And I think that's what we get confused by. It's like, oh, it might look like I've been like given everything because I'm like this happy-go-lucky person. But then if you do look at like the adversity cards that we're all handed, it becomes like a matter of choice. Like, what are you going to choose to focus on? And I even try to help Koa with that at 2 years old. It's like he wants something really bad, but if I can give him choices that will bring him to a happy place, I'm hoping that in the end it will pay off, because I feel like that's what my mom did well.
What would you like to see change in action sports and sports in general for women at this point, at this stage of the game?
I would love to see more brands accept more women on teams. I feel like the more women they have part of these brands in leadership, in high up positions, the more the brand will not just sell through on their product, but also the more relatable, the more united we'll be in all of these different spaces. And something that I've always been really fascinated by is so many brands have 8 to 10 guys on a team, and they'll have one woman, and it's like the token woman, and no other women can sign on that brand because they already have one. And if I could like look to the future, I would love to see equal, but the other struggle that we're having with that is that because there's been such a limited opportunity for women to have these roles with a sponsor, they're not given enough attention or compensation early on, so they end up going to school, or like they change their focus because it's not sustainable. And so right now, like I know that in the industry, like we are looking for more women to be part of action sports. Like we need women to be part of these brands, and there's nobody that we can see or that have come forward where it's like we can start putting them into these brand placements of amazing, extraordinary women athletes. And I think if we can just encourage other guys and young guys too to help mentor their girlfriends, and I say that like they're girls, they're friends that are girls,
Their cousins, their
they're
friends,
exactly, yeah,
sisters.
like the more we can mentor each other to be the best we can be in all aspects, in sports specific. Like if you see a girl out there ripping on a snowboard or surfing, like say nice work, or like give her some kind of affirmation that like she rips. Because the more we elevate each other and we really help create a platform of inclusion, the more we're all going to be able to be out there together, and the bigger our whole audience will be.
What has been throughout your career, looking back, what do you think if you can narrow it down to one or two, what has been your biggest challenge for you, either personally or professionally, throughout your career?
Looking back, I think the hardest thing has been to stay authentic. And I say that delicately because obviously I've learned to use my voice, but when I was younger, it was really hard to not feel like I was always in somebody's shadow, or to find my own uniqueness and really chase that part of myself, and trying to see like why that girl was getting the credit she was getting, and like instead just like harnessing my own uniqueness and authenticity and really chasing that, and not being afraid to speak up, and uh, really elevating the women under me. I wish I would have done that way sooner, even though obviously it's been happening. I just wish that I would have been able to see that we're not competitive all the time. We don't have to be. The more we elevate each other, the better we're all going to be out there. And so those are the things that I think have been the biggest takeaways.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah, hindsight being 2020, it's like you
Yes.
could do more. You really do.
Yes.
Yeah. Fun fact, I like to do these things called fun facts, and a couple of weeks ago I interviewed JJ Thomas, who we found out a fun fact: he surfs regular foot, he skateboards regular foot, but he snowboards goofy foot. And one of these fun facts about you is that, and tell me if this is true or false, 6 weeks after you gave birth to Koa, you went snowboarding again. True or false?
Sure.
How did you do that?
Slowly. Oh, but it felt so good to move and to be back on my board. It was like that ultimate connection. It's like I snowboarded through my pregnancy, and so I truly didn't feel like after birth I wasn't ready right away. Thankfully, my body was like, you need to chill.
Right.
But come that 6-week mark, it was actually the day before my doctor's appointment. I was like, I'm going for a little tour. And then thankfully I was fine. Obviously, I was cleared to be able to resume normal activity. So it was awesome.
So was Chris down at the bottom of the mountain holding the baby just so you could check as you did laps?
No, we went into the backcountry and it was spring, right?
Oh my gosh, she
This
was
is like
great.
April. So he took our Thule chariot with the waist belt like harness, and Chris ski toured with Koa in a little chariot like stroller behind him on the cross country trail. And then we went up into like this low elevation rolly terrain so that we could just like get back into the mountains and feel that movement again.
Yeah, that is so cool. Well, I could probably spend another 3 hours with you. This has been so great. Thank you so much. And I want to remind everyone out there that um, this is an amazing in sports that really broke down some barriers and made action sports better for women and their contracts. And the one thing you don't want to tell Kimmy Fasani is you can't do it, because she's been proving people wrong left and right for years.
Thank you for the kind words, Christian. It's been such an honor to be part of this.
Yeah. Well, please look her up on YouTube. If you are up in Mammoth and happen to run into her, please go say hi. It's been a great honor to have such a powerful woman in action sports to speak with today. So thank you so much.
Thank you.